What if the children at the center of Meghan Markle and Prince Harry's royal fairy tale were never really there to begin with? Imagine that for a moment. The christenings, the photographs, the carefully crafted statements from Buckingham Palace, all of it called into question by one man, Tom Bower, a journalist notorious for digging where others dare not tread. Tonight, we dive into the firestorm that has Meghan Markle outraged, furious, and scrambling as Bower's bombshell evidence suggests something so unthinkable, so destabilizing, that it rattles the very foundation of the Sussex narrative. Archie, Harrison, and Lilibet Diana may not exist in the way the world has been led to believe. Now, before you dismiss this as tabloid chatter or yet another round of royal gossip, ask yourself this. Why would Meghan be so incensed, so on edge, if there were nothing to hide? Why would Tom Bower, a man with decades of credibility in uncovering political and celebrity scandals, risk his reputation by putting forward such a claim? And why, at this particular moment in time, when the Sussex brand seems to be slipping under the weight of its own contradictions, would this revelation explode into public view? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The answer lies not just in what Bower claims, but in the way the story has been stitched together over the years. From the strangely secretive hospital arrangements, to the suspicious absence of traditional royal protocols, to the elusive documentation that should, by all rights, be public knowledge, the trail of inconsistencies runs deeper than many realize. And now, with Bower shining a spotlight on the cracks, the question isn't whether the Sussex narrative will unravel, but how quickly. Think about royal births of the past. When Prince William and Kate welcomed their children, the entire world watched. The photographs on the hospital steps, the official announcements, the certified documents, everything was clear, transparent, and recorded for history. There was no question about the legitimacy of George, Charlotte, or Louis. It was tradition, duty, and openness. But with Meghan, things were different from the start. No photographs at the hospital. No clear line of confirmation about where the births even took place. Conflicting statements about medical staff. In some cases, palace insiders seemed just as confused as the public. Doesn't that strike you as odd? And here's where Tom Bower comes in. His reputation precedes him. He doesn't make casual claims. His work is built on extensive sourcing, documents, interviews, and insider testimonies. So when he drops the suggestion that Archie and Lilibet's births may have been covered up, or worse, fabricated through manipulated documents or surrogacy arrangements hidden from the public, it's not a throwaway headline. It's a calculated exposure. And Meghan's fury is telling, because Meghan knows something the public doesn't. Or at least, she fears that the illusion she has carefully built is finally cracking under the weight of evidence. Consider the timeline. Archie's birth in 2019, surrounded by secrecy. The announcement came, but details were murky. Was Meghan in labor? Was she at the hospital? Why were even senior palace aides left in the dark? Then Lilibet's supposed arrival in 2021, tucked away in California, with no official photos for weeks. Just words. Just statements. Isn't it strange that the world, so hungry for royal imagery, was told simply to take it on faith? But faith only stretches so far. And Bower's revelations cut into that fragile trust. The evidence he presents. Birth certificates that appear altered, hospital records that don't align, insiders whispering about a cover story, strikes at the core of the Sussex brand. Because if Archie and Lilibet's legitimacy is in question, what else about Meghan and Harry's narrative collapses with it? Their victimhood claims, their battle against the monarchy, their pursuit of sympathy and brand deals. All of it hinges on the image of a family persecuted, not perpetrators of a deception. Pause for a moment and imagine the outrage. Not just from the public, but from the institution of the monarchy itself. The Queen, who valued truth and duty above all. Prince William, who has fought to uphold the integrity of the royal line. Even King Charles, wrestling with his own scandal-ridden past, could scarcely tolerate a fabrication of this magnitude tied to the Windsor name. If Meghan and Harry truly misled the world about their children, the fallout isn't just scandal. It's a seismic shift that calls into question the very fabric of trust between royals and their people. And yet, Meghan's defenders will scream, conspiracy, lies. But why then? If it's all baseless, has Meghan's response been so visceral, so defensive, so angry? The louder she protests, the more the public leans in. Because people know, when there's smoke, there's often fire. And Tom Bower has lit a bonfire at Meghan's doorstep. But perhaps the most chilling part of this story isn't what's already been revealed, it's what still lies beneath. We've only scratched the surface in this introduction. The missing signatures, the contradictory timelines, the palace insiders who were silenced, the media organizations that looked the other way. Piece by piece, this puzzle points to something darker, something Meghan Markle never wanted exposed. And here's the twist. The outrage Meghan shows now might not just be about protecting her children's privacy. It might be about protecting herself. Because if Tom Bower's claims are substantiated, Meghan isn't just a controversial duchess. She becomes the architect of one of the greatest royal deceptions in modern history. So let me ask you directly. Do you believe Archie and Lilibet exist as the public has been told? Or do you sense, deep down, that something doesn't add up? This isn't a simple matter of gossip. It's a matter of legacy, of trust, of history being written in real time. And as we unravel this story tonight, prepare yourself for contradictions, betrayals, and shocking revelations. Because what Tom Bower has uncovered doesn't just call Meghan into question, it threatens to dismantle the entire Sussex brand. But this is just the beginning. Because the first missing piece of the puzzle isn't a rumor. It isn't an anonymous source. It's buried in the birth certificates themselves. And once you see what's missing, you'll understand why Meghan Markle's outrage has turned into panic. The air was heavy with tension the moment Tom Bower's revelation hit the headlines. It wasn't just another royal rumor, not the usual chatter about outfits, family squabbles, or tabloid whispers of jealousy. This was different. This was nuclear. The kind of claim that could topple everything Meghan and Harry had built, their brand, their sympathy narrative, even their standing in Hollywood. And Meghan's reaction? Outrage. Furious outrage. The kind of outrage that tells you something struck dangerously close to the truth. Picture it. The story breaks online. Not from some nameless tabloid, not from a shadowy forum, but from Tom Bower, a man known for cutting through smoke and mirrors to get to the rot beneath. His book releases, his interviews circulate, his words travel like wildfire. There is no proof that Archie Harrison or Lilibet Diana exist in the way the world has been told, he suggests. The line doesn't just land, it detonates. Headlines splash across global media. Commentators scramble. Royal watchers gasp. And Meghan? She reportedly went into a rage behind closed doors, calling lawyers, calling PR advisors, calling anyone who could help her choke this fire before it spread. But here's the thing. Outrage alone doesn't silence doubt. Outrage doesn't erase questions. Outrage only amplifies them. And Tom Bower knew that. He calculated it. He dropped the bomb not to whisper into the void, but to echo into every corner of royal debate. Let's pause here. Ask yourself, why did Meghan react so viscerally? If a claim is baseless, absurd, laughable, wouldn't the smarter move be silence? A royal shrug? After all, Prince William and Kate Middleton have endured wild rumors. William supposedly cheating, Kate allegedly battling secret illnesses, and yet they don't rage publicly at every whisper. They stand firm. They let silence starve nonsense of oxygen. But Meghan? Meghan rages. Meghan sues. Meghan unleashes her fury. Could it be because she fears this claim isn't so easy to brush off? And the public noticed. Within hours of Bower's words hitting circulation, social media exploded. Twitter threads dissected inconsistencies. TikToks replayed every public statement about the births. YouTube commentators poured gasoline on the fire, pulling up timelines, screenshots, photos that didn't align. And in those first 48 hours, it wasn't the palace scrambling, it was Meghan. She became the story, not Bower. Her outrage screamed louder than the accusation itself. What exactly did Bower point to? He didn't conjure a theory from thin air. He highlighted the secrecy that surrounded Archie's birth in 2019. No photos on hospital steps. No immediate release of a birth certificate. Palace aides issuing confusing statements, first saying Meghan was in labor, then hours later announcing she had already given birth. A slip-up? Or a carefully staged narrative gone slightly off-script? And then with Lilibet in 2021, born in California, the secrecy multiplied. No hospital confirmation, No photographic evidence, just an announcement released to media outlets. Doesn't that feel strange? We're talking about royal children, heirs, part of history. Traditionally, these births are etched into the record with transparency. But in Meghan's case, the opacity was suffocating. And when Bauer dredged it all up again, laying the inconsistencies side by side, the pattern became too glaring to ignore. But here's where the shockwave grew stronger. It wasn't just Meghan and Harry's credibility at stake. The monarchy itself faced humiliation. Because if Tom Bauer's claim held any truth, that Archie and Lilibet may not exist as presented, then Buckingham Palace had either been complicit or duped. And the monarchy being duped? That's a scandal of historic proportions. Think about how damaging that is. The Queen herself, who christened Archie. Prince Charles, who reportedly met his grandchildren. Prince William, who made icy statements but never publicly questioned their existence. If the narrative falls apart, it's not just Meghan who burns. It's the entire royal institution. And that's what makes this so explosive. The media played its part too. Some outlets tried to bury the story, downplaying Bauer's claims as controversial or baseless. But the very act of suppressing only made the whispers grow louder. People began to ask, why is the mainstream media protecting Meghan? Why can't the public see straightforward proof, a birth certificate, a hospital confirmation, a photo on the day? Instead, everything about Archie and Lilibet seems to come in curated drips, months late, staged, or oddly incomplete. And Meghan's fury only amplified suspicion. Lawyers whispering about defamation suits. Friends leaking statements about how hurtful and dangerous such rumors are. Oprah's team reportedly concerned about being misled. Hollywood producers growing uneasy. Meghan could feel the walls closing in. But maybe the most interesting reaction came from the palace. Silence. Deafening silence. No denial. No official correction. No bold statement of fact to shut Bauer down. And that silence spoke volumes. Because when the palace has the truth on its side, it usually speaks. When it doesn't, it stays quiet. Here's where I want you to think critically. Why now? Why did Tom Bauer wait until this point to drop his evidence? Was it calculated? Was it timed with Harry's flailing public image, his failing Netflix deals, Meghan's desperate rebranding attempts? Was this his way of ensuring maximum impact? Because the timing couldn't have been worse for Meghan. Already, she was losing sympathy. Already, the victim narrative was wearing thin. And then, boom, this bombshell. The shockwave rippled far beyond the UK. In America, where Meghan has worked so hard to secure her Hollywood fairy tale, whispers of deception are poison. No studio, no streaming service, no brand wants to be associated with scandal of this magnitude. If the public believes Meghan fabricated or concealed the truth about her children, her brand collapses overnight. Sponsors walk away. Deals evaporate. Audiences turn hostile. And that's why Meghan's outrage isn't just personal, it's professional. It's survival. She knows this isn't just about family privacy. This is about the very foundation of her empire. But here's the chilling part. Bauer's evidence is only the first domino. The shockwave isn't just about a single claim. It's about what it triggers. Once you question the children, you question everything. The timeline of events. The Oprah interview. The Netflix docuseries. Every photo, every statement, every curated moment becomes suspect. And Meghan can't control that spiral. So as Meghan's outrage grows, so does the curiosity of the world. People who never questioned before are now digging. People who once defended her are going quiet. And people who already doubted her, they're vindicated. But the shockwave doesn't stop here. Because the first real piece of hard evidence, the one Tom Bauer points to as the start of the unraveling, lies not in rumors or speculation, but in the birth certificates themselves. And once those documents are examined, the inconsistencies become impossible to ignore. And that's where we're heading next. Because if you thought Meghan's outrage over Tom Bauer's revelation was explosive, wait until you see the missing details on the very documents that should have put every doubt to rest. What if the very documents meant to secure Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana's place in history actually raise more questions than they answer? What if the so-called proof of their existence, their birth certificates, only deepens the mystery? This is where Tom Bauer's bombshell really begins to sting. Because when you dig into the paperwork, when you line it up against royal protocol and basic expectations, something doesn't fit. Something crucial is missing. And Meghan Markle's silence on these inconsistencies speaks louder than any denial ever could. Let's start with Archie. In May 2019, the world was told Meghan had given birth to a healthy baby boy at Portland Hospital in London. The palace issued a statement, albeit a confusing one, first claiming Meghan was in labor, only to announce hours later that she had already delivered. Odd. Royal births have always been handled with meticulous timing. Precision is the rule. But here, we saw a contradiction. Was it a slip of communication, or something else? When Archie's birth certificate was finally made public, it only raised more eyebrows. First, Meghan's name. Initially, it read Rachel Meghan, Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex. Perfectly ordinary. Then, without explanation, it was altered. Rachel Meghan was erased, replaced with simply Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex. Why? Was it a clerical correction? Or an attempt to obscure the document trail? To this day, no clear explanation has been given. And then there's the matter of the witnesses. Royal births traditionally involve clear medical confirmation, with physicians' names recorded. For William and Kate's children, this process was transparent, visible, without controversy. But in Archie's case, details were strangely vague. The attending doctor was listed, but reports later surfaced that Meghan had initially wanted a home birth and switched plans last minute. The problem? Hospital staff couldn't recall the sequence of events clearly. Journalists trying to verify found roadblocks. Doesn't that strike you as odd? But Archie's certificate is nothing compared to the silence surrounding Lilibet Diana. In June 2021, Meghan and Harry announced her birth in Santa Barbara, California. Yet no certificate was released to the public for weeks. Unlike Archie's, which was eventually obtained through British records, Lilibet's remained tucked away. Only when pressure mounted did a version surface, revealing Harry had listed his title, Duke of Sussex, while Meghan was noted as Rachel Meghan Markle. A reversal of Archie's curious edits. 2 children, 2 birth certificates, 2 sets of contradictions. Ask yourself, why the inconsistency? Why the secrecy? Why the changes? Royal births are historic events, meant to be etched into stone with precision. But here, we're left with smudges, contradictions, and edits that don't add up. Tom Bower highlights this as the first crack in the facade. Because if something as straightforward as a birth certificate is altered, delayed, or concealed, what else might be fabricated? And remember, these aren't ordinary celebrity children. These are children in the royal line of succession. Every detail matters. Every document is supposed to be preserved with pristine accuracy, not amended in strange ways after the fact. The absence of clarity here isn't just sloppy, it's suspicious. Imagine the weight of this. Birth certificates are supposed to be the ultimate proof, the legal, unshakable foundation of identity. Yet here, we're confronted with alterations, delays, and questions that remain unanswered. And Meghan's outrage, when Bower shines a spotlight on this, makes sense. Because once the world sees the inconsistencies, it's only natural to wonder, what exactly are they hiding? It's not just about names and titles. It's about timing. It's about secrecy. It's about why Meghan and Harry broke with every royal tradition, avoiding the hospital photo call, avoiding transparency, and instead issuing carefully curated statements. If there was nothing to conceal, why not follow protocol? Why not show the world what it expects to see? And then comes the whispers from within. Palace insiders, speaking carefully, hinting that even they weren't given full access to the truth. Senior aides admitting confusion. Staffers muttering about contradictions in Meghan's pregnancy timelines. Did she appear visibly pregnant at times, then oddly not at others? Did her story of labor shift depending on the audience? Every inconsistency ties back to those documents. So what happens when a birth certificate, instead of silencing rumors, fuels them? Public trust evaporates. And that's exactly what's happened here. Far from putting questions to rest, the records themselves have become Exhibit A in the growing case against Meghan's narrative. But here's where the tension spikes. Tom Bower insists these inconsistencies aren't clerical errors or simple misunderstandings. He believes they point to something far more deliberate. A calculated attempt to obscure the truth about Archie and Lilibet's origins. And if that's true, then Meghan's outrage isn't just about protecting her privacy. It's about protecting a secret that could destroy everything. Now ask yourself, if Archie's certificate was altered and Lilibet's delayed, what's next? What else lies hidden in sealed hospital records, in confidential palace files, in the memories of staff sworn to silence? Because if the paperwork already looks suspicious, imagine what the unreleased documents might reveal. And that's where we're headed. Because whispers of surrogacy, of staged appearances, of moon bumps, and shifting timelines don't exist in a vacuum. They find fuel in these very inconsistencies. And once you connect the dots, the picture that emerges is far more shocking than a clerical edit. Because the missing pieces of the birth records are only the beginning. The real scandal comes with the whispers of surrogacy. Whispers that have followed Meghan since day one, and whispers Tom Bower claims are about to explode into undeniable evidence. What if Meghan Markle never carried Archie or Lilibet at all? What if the whispers that have circled for years about surrogacy, whispers dismissed as conspiracies, mocked by mainstream outlets, hushed by the palace, actually hold more truth than fiction? This is where the story turns from mere inconsistencies in documents to something far more explosive. Because the rumor of moon bumps, staged pregnancies, and secret surrogate arrangements has haunted Meghan since she stepped onto the royal stage with a supposedly growing belly. And Tom Bower's bombshell evidence doesn't silence those whispers, it amplifies them. Let's rewind to October 2018. Meghan, glowing in Sydney, Australia, alongside Harry, cradling what appeared to be the early signs of pregnancy. The world erupted in excitement. Another royal baby on the way. But almost instantly, sharp-eyed observers noticed something odd. The bump seemed to change shape dramatically from one day to the next. One moment flat, the next protruding. Videos circulated online of Meghan bending down, and the bump appeared to shift unnaturally, as though not quite attached. Clips were slowed down, freeze-framed, dissected. The whispers of a moon bump, a prosthetic used to simulate pregnancy, began. Ask yourself, in an age where everything can be scrutinized, why were so many moments of Meghan's pregnancy shrouded in visual oddities? Why did the bump sometimes appear too low, other times too high? Why did Meghan herself cradle it constantly, as though to remind the cameras it was there? Was it a natural instinct of a glowing mother-to-be, or a calculated act to reinforce a narrative? And then came the hospital secrecy. Unlike Kate, who dutifully posed on the steps of the Lindo wing just hours after delivering her children, Meghan vanished. No photos, no hospital steps, no transparency. The palace issued confusing statements about her labor. The announcement of Archie's birth seemed scrambled. Hours after telling the public she was in labor, it was suddenly declared she had already delivered. A slip-up, or a staged timeline meant to cover up the reality of a surrogate birth elsewhere. Tom Bower zeroes in on this point. In his analysis, the palace's odd communication strategy wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. It was misdirection. If Meghan had used a surrogate, the palace would have been complicit in covering it up, and that revelation alone would shake the monarchy to its core. Because never before in royal history had a surrogate been used without acknowledgement. Royal births are sacred, bound to tradition. They are witnessed, recorded, made public. But in Meghan's case, secrecy reigned. And Lilibet? The whispers only grew louder. Announced as born in California in June 2021, but again, no photographic evidence at the hospital. No staff accounts. No nurses stepping forward, as often happens, to gush about their royal patient. Just words on paper. A statement released to the press. A name tied sentimentally to the Queen and Princess Diana. Yet again, the world was told to accept the story without proof. Direct question to you. Doesn't it strike you as suspicious that for both children, the same pattern emerges: secrecy, confusion, and a lack of transparency? Once could be oversight. Twice begins to look like design. And here's where the moon bump theory resurfaces. Countless photographs of Meghan walking in public during her supposed pregnancies show strange folds, bumps shifting, even clips where the belly seems to collapse as she bends. While tabloids dismiss these as optical illusions, Bower argues they are consistent with a prosthetic. And if a prosthetic was used, the only logical conclusion is that Meghan was never pregnant in the first place. Why would Meghan do this? Bower points to control. Surrogacy, if revealed, would have invited invasive questions. Who was the surrogate? Was the arrangement legal? Were the children biologically Meghan and Harry's? Rather than risk scrutiny, Meghan allegedly chose to play the role of pregnant Duchess, crafting the perfect fairy tale image. In her world, perception mattered more than truth. But perception has limits. Because no matter how carefully you stage a narrative, contradictions slip through. Staffers whispered about Meghan disappearing at odd times. Journalists noted how her due dates shifted. Even the Queen herself was reportedly puzzled by Meghan's refusal to follow tradition during Archie's arrival. And when Lilibet came, the palace seemed unusually cautious, almost detached, as though unsure how much to validate. Surrogacy itself is not a scandal. Many families choose it. But hiding it? Pretending otherwise? For a royal figure, that's a bombshell. Because if Meghan misled the monarchy, the media, and the public about something so foundational as her children's births, what else has she misled us about? And here lies the sting. Bower's evidence doesn't outright declare no children exist. Instead, it suggests that the narrative of Meghan carrying them is a fabrication, and that Archie and Lilibet's origins remain shrouded in secrets. Are they the biological children of Meghan and Harry? Or were arrangements made that the public will never see on paper? Think about it. If Meghan truly wanted to silence surrogacy rumors, she had every opportunity. A single hospital photo, a straightforward record, a transparent timeline. Yet she chose secrecy at every turn. And secrecy breeds suspicion. The surrogacy whispers aren't just about odd photos or strange bumps. They tie directly back to the inconsistencies in the birth records, the palace's strange handling of announcements, and Meghan's constant need to control the narrative. And once Bower put the pieces together, the whispers became more than conspiracy chatter. They became part of a much larger puzzle of deception. And this puzzle isn't just whispered by critics online. According to Bower, even palace insiders have raised their eyebrows, muttering behind closed doors that things didn't add up. If those whispers ever become testimony, Meghan's carefully curated image as a glowing mother could collapse overnight. But this story doesn't end here. Because if surrogacy whispers explain the bumps and the secrecy, what about the people inside the palace? The aides who watched Meghan's every move? The staffers who were present during those critical months? Their accounts, Tom Bower suggests, could be the most damning evidence yet. Because while Meghan may have controlled the public eye, behind palace walls, staff saw things that simply didn't align with her narrative. And when one of those aides allegedly spoke to Bower, the story shifted from rumor to chilling reality. Behind the gilded doors of Buckingham Palace in Kensington, there are people who see everything. They're not royals, not aristocrats, not media darlings. They are the staff. The private secretaries, the aides, the nannies, the cleaners, the drivers. The ones who notice when something feels off. And during Meghan Markle's supposed pregnancies, according to Tom Bower, more than one staffer noticed things that didn't add up. Their whispers, carefully passed along, paint a picture of contradictions that could shatter Meghan's carefully curated narrative. Imagine it. Palace aides who have been around for decades, who've seen multiple royal births, who know the protocols down to the smallest detail. They watched Kate Middleton walk through 3 pregnancies with clarity, tradition, and order. Doctors' visits, official announcements, a hospital call, a waiting press corps, smiling photos on the steps of the Lindo wing. Flawless, traditional, documented. But then came Meghan. From the start, staff realized this wouldn't be like the others. Meetings about secrecy, instructions to keep details under lock and key, unusual demands, even restrictions on who could access Meghan during certain stages of her supposed pregnancy. And it wasn't just the secrecy. Staff began to notice physical oddities. One aide reportedly whispered about Meghan's bump appearing drastically different from morning to evening. Another said Meghan's maternity clothing seemed oddly padded, shifting in shape. One staff member allegedly confided that during an event, Meghan bent down and the bump folded in a way that seemed unnatural. To the outside world, these were small moments. But inside the palace, they added up to a worrying picture. Now let's pause. Ask yourself, why would staff risk even quietly raising doubts if they weren't genuinely unsettled? These people live and die by discretion. They keep royal secrets that never see the light of day. If whispers leaked to Tom Bower, it suggests something profound, that even behind palace walls, trust in Meghan's story was fractured. Bower writes that aides began to ask questions quietly among themselves. Was Meghan really pregnant? Why were there so few medical visits documented compared to Kate? Why were traditional protocols, like notifying senior royals of the labor, abandoned? Why did Meghan and Harry seem determined to control the birth narrative with such iron fists? One aide allegedly said, "It was as if they were performing a play, and we were the audience forced to applaud." But the most chilling account, according to Bauer, came from a staffer close to the couple during Archie's supposed arrival. This individual noted that when the palace first announced Meghan was in labor, they themselves were confused, because hours earlier, Meghan hadn't looked anywhere near labor. Then, almost magically, news broke that Archie had already been born. The timeline didn't match what this staffer had observed. Was it a mix-up? Or a cover story designed to obscure where the baby actually came from? And it wasn't just Archie. During the lead-up to Lilibet's birth in California, insiders reportedly noticed how Meghan's public appearances didn't line up with her claimed due dates. In some photos, she appeared heavily pregnant. In others, just weeks later, noticeably slimmer. Staff close to the Sussexes in California described the same insistence on secrecy, the same refusal to allow normal transparency, and the same heavily managed public statements. The pattern repeated itself. Think about the human element here. Staff who dedicate their lives to royal duty, suddenly questioning whether what they were witnessing was real. These are people who endured endless lectures about Meghan's need for privacy, even while she invited Netflix cameras into her personal life. People who were ordered to maintain silence, even when inconsistencies screamed out at them. Can you imagine the frustration? The feeling of being used as props in a story you knew didn't add up? And here's where the irony stings. Meghan and Harry often painted themselves as victims of palace staff leaks, claiming aides were against them, briefing the press, and undermining their every move. But what if the truth is more complex? What if staff weren't malicious, but simply unsettled by what they were witnessing? What if the leaks Meghan despised weren't betrayals, but warning signals that something deeply irregular was unfolding? Tom Bauer doesn't mince words. He suggests that palace staff, though gagged by official protocols, were some of the earliest skeptics of Meghan's pregnancy story. Their whispered doubts, their confusion, their observations about inconsistencies, all fed into the larger narrative he presents. Meghan and Harry, according to this theory, weren't battling cruel insiders. They were battling the truth. And that truth, if it ever fully came out, would have destroyed everything. Because once staff testimony aligns with missing documents and shifting timelines, the illusion collapses. Meghan knew this. That's why she and Harry left the palace. That's why they severed ties with staff who might one day speak. That's why, in California, they surrounded themselves with loyalists and contracts designed to ensure silence. But the problem with silence is that it doesn't erase memory. Staff remember what they saw. They remember the folds, the shifts, the sudden timeline changes. They remember the secrecy. They remember being told to accept contradictions without question. And when people like Tom Bauer come knocking, some of those memories spill. Ask yourself, if staffers truly believed Meghan's pregnancies were authentic, wouldn't their testimonies reflect that? Wouldn't they speak with certainty, putting rumors to rest? Instead, we hear the opposite: hesitation, unease, doubt. These aren't wild conspiracy theorists. They are palace insiders. Their perspective carries weight, and their whispers create the perfect storm. Because if staff testimony supports the possibility of deception, if documents reveal inconsistencies, and if Meghan herself responds with outrage rather than calm transparency, the public connects the dots. And those dots don't form the picture of a glowing royal mother. They form the image of a stage performance. But if palace staff were already questioning the story behind closed doors, how did the media miss it? How did the narrative stay so neatly under control? That's where the next piece of the puzzle emerges, the theory of media collusion. Because Meghan's story didn't just survive palace scrutiny, it thrived in the press. And according to Tom Bauer, that wasn't an accident. From the moment Meghan Markle's pregnancies were announced, the media coverage was peculiar. Normally, the press devours every scrap of royal maternity news, due dates, hospital arrangements, glimpses of baby bumps. Yet with Meghan, there was a strange silence where scrutiny should have been deafening. Instead of probing questions, many outlets parroted carefully crafted palace statements. Instead of challenging inconsistencies, They printed glowing features about Meghan's modern approach to motherhood. And Tom Bower argues this wasn't coincidence. This was collusion. Ask yourself, why did the media, so ruthless with Diana, so invasive with Kate, suddenly tread carefully with Meghan? Why did headlines that should have screamed with suspicion instead read like press releases? Was it compassion? Or was it control? Tom Bower believes Meghan engineered secret deals with sympathetic journalists and editors, trades of access, exclusives, and private leaks in exchange for silence on the more awkward questions. Think about it. Meghan was a former actress, trained in Hollywood's publicity game. She understood how to shape a narrative. She knew the power of feeding small pieces of gossip to win protection from bigger stories. And insiders have long whispered that Meghan played the press like a piano, leaking what suited her, burying what didn't. Take Archie's birth in 2019. The media knew something was strange. Conflicting palace announcements. No hospital photos. Hours of confusion over whether Meghan was in labor or had already delivered. In any other royal scenario, the press would have torn the palace apart for answers. But this time, soft features about Meghan breaking tradition and protecting her privacy dominated. It was almost as if the watchdogs had agreed to put down their teeth. Why? Because Meghan fed them exclusives elsewhere. Carefully chosen photos. Private tidbits about her struggles behind palace walls. Leaks that painted her as a victim. In exchange, reporters held back on asking the questions that really mattered. Where, exactly, was Archie born? Who attended the birth? Why the timeline errors? And when it came to Lilibet in 2021, the pattern repeated. The announcement dropped. Reporters noted the odd secrecy, but instead of digging, coverage turned to the sentimentality of her name. Lilibet, honoring the Queen. Diana, honoring Harry's mother. Headlines brimmed with emotion, not suspicion. But ask yourself, why didn't any major outlet demand proof? Why weren't reporters camped outside the California hospital? Why was there no rush of nurses eager to tell their story? It's because the narrative had already been packaged, and the press had already agreed to deliver it. And here's where Bower sharpens the knife. This wasn't just ordinary PR. It was survival. Meghan understood something crucial. The media is hungry. Always hungry. Feed it, and it will protect you. Starve it, and it will devour you. So she chose to feed it selectively. Positive leaks about tensions with William and Kate. Carefully chosen tidbits about Harry's estrangement from Charles. Emotional confessions of her struggles with mental health. Every piece designed to earn sympathy, to draw attention away from the inconsistencies in her pregnancies. But when you trade information like this, you also trade integrity. Journalists who might have pressed hard on the birth records suddenly found themselves protecting Meghan, unwilling to bite the hand that fed them. And those who dared to question the narrative? They were smeared as racist, misogynistic, or cruel. A tactic designed to silence dissent. Now pause. Does that sound like transparency to you? Or does it sound like manipulation? Even within palace press offices, tension brewed. Some aides, according to Bower, were frustrated that Meghan was bypassing traditional communications protocols, cutting her own side deals with media contacts. This wasn't just unusual, it was dangerous. Because if the truth about her children's origins ever leaked, those who played along in the cover-up would be complicit. And the institution of the monarchy would be dragged down with her. The deeper irony is that Meghan and Harry publicly railed against the media. They called it toxic, racist, predatory. And yet, behind closed doors, Meghan allegedly courted the very reporters she condemned. She used them when it suited her, silenced them when it didn't, and painted herself as a victim to shield herself from scrutiny. But even the best manipulation has limits. Because not all reporters were willing to play along. Some began noticing cracks, contradictory timelines, missing documents, odd photos. And while mainstream outlets hesitated, independent journalists and online sleuths began digging. They pulled records, analyzed videos, compared bumps, dissected photos. And slowly, the whispers of a surrogacy cover-up refused to die. And that's the heart of the collusion theory. Meghan didn't erase suspicion. She simply delayed it. By controlling the narrative through deals and leaks, she bought herself time. Time to move to America. Time to secure Netflix deals. Time to cement her victimhood brand. But Tom Bower argues the clock has run out. The press may have colluded, but now the truth is seeping out anyway. Ask yourself this. If Meghan truly wanted to end the speculation, wouldn't the easiest move have been to release full, transparent documentation? Wouldn't a hospital photo, a doctor's statement, or a straightforward birth certificate silence the doubters instantly? Instead, we got secrecy, altered records, and media that looked the other way. Why? Because once the media's role is exposed, the cover-up isn't just Meghan's. It becomes an indictment of the entire system. Journalists, editors, palace aides, all comply. And that's where the real betrayal lies. Not just Meghan misleading the public, not just the palace playing along, but the media, the very institution tasked with holding power to account, choosing instead to protect her. But Meghan's media games were only one piece of the puzzle, because behind the carefully crafted headlines lay something darker, the question of her own identity. The possibility that her history itself, the documents, the records, the stories, had been altered long before she ever entered the palace. And when Tom Bower turned his lens toward Meghan's past, what he found raised questions not just about her pregnancies, but about who Meghan Markle really is. Who is Meghan Markle, really? Not the smiling Duchess who dazzled on her wedding day. Not the Hollywood actress who played Rachel Zane on Suits. Not the self-styled humanitarian who spoke about equality at the United Nations. Tom Bower argues that the woman the world thinks it knows may be the result of meticulous reinvention, a crafted identity, polished and protected with falsified documents, selective narratives, and carefully buried truths. And if the foundation of Meghan's identity was manipulated, what does that say about the legitimacy of the story she tells now, especially about Archie and Lilibet? Let's begin with something simple: names. Meghan was born Rachel Meghan Markle. Yet from her earliest public life, she pushed Meghan to the front. Perfectly normal for a performer, yes. But in Bower's telling, the shift wasn't just about stage presence. It was about constructing a persona. Rachel became the forgotten past. Meghan became the brand. Ask yourself, what other parts of her past did she streamline, cut away, or alter to fit the fairy tale she wanted to sell? Then there are her family records. Meghan has often painted a narrative of a struggling childhood, growing up with divorced parents, facing financial hardship, fighting for her place in the world. It's a compelling story. But Bower points to contradictions: school records, financial documents, even testimonies from relatives who claim Meghan exaggerated her hardships to appear more relatable. One relative reportedly said, "She was never as poor as she wants people to believe. It's all part of the act." Could the tale of the struggling outsider be less about reality and more about brand positioning? And then comes the bigger allegation: falsified documents. Bower hints at records that don't quite align. Paperwork regarding Meghan's education, early career, and even residency history that appears altered or incomplete. Why does this matter? Because if Meghan's identity documents contain inconsistencies, it casts doubt on everything that followed, including the birth records of her children. It establishes a pattern. Control the paper trail, control the narrative. Hollywood insiders have whispered the same. They remember Meghan as someone intensely conscious of image. Weight carefully managed. Photographs retouched. Age rumored to be shaved down. Did Meghan really enter Hollywood as the fresh-faced ingenue she claimed, or had she already trimmed years off her official timeline? Some critics suggest Meghan's public age may not match the one etched on early records, a charge she has never convincingly addressed. And here's the irony. Meghan often criticizes the palace for not protecting her identity. Yet Bower suggests her identity was never under threat from the palace, because she had already rewritten it long before she married Harry. What the palace encountered was not Meghan Markle the person, but Meghan Markle the character. Now imagine the stakes when that character entered the royal family. Every detail mattered: background checks, family vetting, document verification. The firm operates like a machine of precision. Yet somehow, Meghan's inconsistencies were overlooked or ignored. Why? Was it desperation to modernize the monarchy? A desire to avoid accusations of bias? Or did Meghan's charm simply blind those around her to the warning signs? Once inside, Meghan doubled down on controlling her image. Staff recall her obsession with how she was photographed, how she was described, what stories were told. She micromanaged every press release. She demanded changes to official documents. Remember Archie's birth certificate? Her name altered after the fact. Small detail, yes, but one that fits a broader pattern of identity manipulation. Ask yourself, why would someone so obsessed with controlling her personal image suddenly become so careless with something as significant as her children's official documents? The answer may be simple, because the manipulation wasn't careless at all. It was deliberate. If you've already rewritten your own narrative, rewriting your children's is just the next step. And then there's Meghan's relationship with her family. Estranged from her father, distant from her half-siblings, even her mother's role shrouded in carefully crafted mystique. Each relationship trimmed, curated, reshaped to fit the story Meghan wanted the public to believe. Tom Bower suggests that Meghan wasn't just estranging relatives. She was erasing inconvenient witnesses to her past. After all, who can challenge your narrative if no one from your past has a platform? But here's the chilling part. Bower's evidence suggests Meghan's identity management isn't simply about vanity. It's about survival. By controlling documents, by altering details, by burying contradictions, Meghan built a fortress around her version of reality. And that fortress is what protects her most sensitive secrets, including the truth about Archie and Lilibet. Direct question to you. If someone is willing to adjust their age, their school records, their family narrative, their very identity to suit a public image, wouldn't it follow that they'd be capable of manipulating the story of their children's births too? This is where Bower draws his sharpest conclusion. Meghan's carefully crafted identity wasn't just about creating a Duchess the public could admire. It was practice, a rehearsal for the greatest performance of all, playing the role of a mother in a royal fairy tale. And if that performance is exposed as a fabrication, then Meghan's entire persona collapses. But remember, identity isn't just about paperwork or perception. It's about power. And Meghan's power within the royal family wasn't just tied to her charm or her looks. It was tied to access, to money, to resources, to royal privilege. Which is why the next chapter in this saga turns to something even more dangerous than falsified documents. The question of how Meghan handled royal finances. Because if she was willing to manipulate her identity for control, what might she have done with the wealth and funds at her fingertips during her brief time as a working royal? Money. In the world of the monarchy, it isn't just currency. It's power, privilege, and, most importantly, trust. For centuries, royal finances have been one of the most closely scrutinized aspects of the institution. Every pound comes under the public gaze, every expense accounted for, every indulgence justified. Which is why what Tom Bower suggests about Meghan Markle and Prince Harry's handling of royal funds is so devastating. Because if Meghan manipulated the narrative about her children, could she also have manipulated the flow of money that came with her royal status? Let's start with the basics. As working royals, Meghan and Harry were funded through multiple streams: the sovereign grant, taxpayer money, Duchy of Cornwall revenues, controlled by Charles at the time, and private inheritances. This money wasn't pocket change. It was millions intended to fund staff, travel, security, and the duties of their roles. And yet, almost from the beginning, whispers circulated about how Meghan and Harry were spending far more than they brought in. Remember Frogmore Cottage? The Queen gifted them that property as a marital home. But Meghan and Harry didn't just move in. They demanded a complete renovation. Walls knocked down, interiors redesigned, luxury fittings installed. The bill? Over £2.4 million of taxpayer funds. And here's the irony. Barely had the paint dried when Meghan and Harry abandoned Frogmore to escape to North America. Public outrage was instant. Why pour millions into a home they had no intention of keeping? Was it recklessness, entitlement, or something more deliberate? A calculated misuse of funds while they still could? Then there were the wardrobes. Meghan's outfits during her brief stint as a working royal reportedly cost over £900,000 in a single year. One of the most extravagant in modern royal history. Dresses, jewels, custom designer pieces. Critics wondered, was this the Duchess showcasing style or siphoning funds into her personal brand? Because every outfit wasn't just a dress. It was an investment in Meghan's image, an image she carried with her long after stepping away from royal life. But the financial questions don't stop at extravagance. Tom Bower suggests Meghan was keenly aware of how money and narrative intertwined. Staffers whispered that Meghan pressured palace offices to cover certain expenses under official duties that may have been more personal in nature. lavish trips, PR consultations, even rumored payments to secure certain media relationships. If true, this wasn't just bending the rules. It was breaking the covenant of trust between the monarchy and the public. And then came the Sussex Royal branding debacle. Meghan and Harry attempted to trademark Sussex Royal across a sweeping range of products. Clothing, stationery, even wellness services. Imagine it, royal titles, funded by the taxpayer, leveraged as a global business empire. While still working royals, this wasn't about service. It was about monetization, about turning the crown into a cash cow. Public backlash was fierce, and the Queen herself stepped in to forbid the use of royal in their branding once they stepped back. But the attempt revealed motive. Meghan wasn't just along for the royal ride. She was looking for the exit strategy and how to cash in on it. Ask yourself, why would Meghan and Harry pursue trademarks on such a vast scale while still under the Queen's roof? Why the rush to commercialize their roles? Could it be because they already knew they weren't staying? And if so, were they using their time as working royals to build the financial scaffolding of their post-royal empire? Consider the Netflix and Spotify deals that followed their departure. Multi-million-pound contracts built not on their work history, but on their royal cachet. Without Archie and Lilibet in the picture, without the image of the modern royal family persecuted by the firm, would those deals have been as lucrative? Probably not. Which makes Bauer's claim all the more chilling. If the children's births were part of the illusion, they weren't just personal fabrications. They were financial leverage, tools to boost sympathy, marketability, and brand appeal. And let's not forget the security saga. Harry insisted his family needed taxpayer-funded security, even after they stepped down. Court battles raged over who should foot the bill. Meanwhile, reports surfaced that the couple had explored private funding arrangements with billionaires and corporations. Again, the question arises, were royal privileges being twisted into bargaining chips? The parallels here are striking. Just as Meghan allegedly crafted her identity to suit her ambitions, she and Harry appear to have treated royal finances as resources to be manipulated, reshaped, and maximized for their own gain. The monarchy wasn't just an institution to serve. It was a stepping stone, a launchpad for a transatlantic celebrity empire. And the public felt betrayed. Taxpayers who had funded Frogmore Cottage renovations. Fans who believed in their promise of service. Even members of the royal household, who saw centuries of duty reduced to dollar signs. It wasn't just money that Meghan and Harry were accused of mishandling. It was trust. And once trust is broken, it's nearly impossible to restore. But here's where the story deepens. Because money wasn't Meghan's only motive. Image, control, and secrecy played equal roles. And while financial controversies rattled public trust, another illusion was quietly being built in California. One that extended beyond bank accounts and into the very walls of their home. Because if Meghan manipulated documents, staff, and funds, what about the stage she built in Montecito? What about the life she and Harry presented to the world after leaving the palace? Was it authentic, or was it just another illusion, as carefully crafted as her pregnancies? Montecito. To the world, it looks like paradise. Sun-drenched lawns, sprawling estates tucked behind high hedges, the glimmering Pacific Ocean just minutes away. For Meghan and Harry, it was supposed to be the ultimate escape, the sanctuary where they could finally live free of palace control. But scratch beneath the surface of this picture-perfect California dream, and what emerges is something far less idyllic. Tom Bower paints Montecito not as a home, but as a stage built for performance, curated to perfection, and designed to convince the world of a narrative that may not exist at all. Think about how Meghan and Harry's Montecito mansion has been presented. Oprah's cameras didn't just arrive there by accident. Magazine spreads showcasing aerial shots of their estate didn't just leak. Netflix documentaries offering intimate glimpses of their lives didn't appear out of thin air. Every reveal, every curated look at their property, was strategic. And in those carefully staged moments, what always stood front and center? Their image as a family. Meghan, Harry, Archie, and Lilibet. The modern royal unit, thriving away from the crown. But here's where it gets strange. For all the glamour, for all the glossy interviews, we rarely see Archie and Lilibet in candid, unfiltered settings. When we do see them, the photos often spark more questions than answers. lighting that looks staged, faces obscured, angles that conceal more than they reveal, family portraits that appear oddly retouched. The children, supposedly central to the Sussex narrative, seem to exist mostly in curated fragments. Isn't that peculiar? Now, compare this to other royals. William and Kate regularly release candid family photos, not paparazzi shots, but carefully chosen, yes, and yet undeniably real. You can see the joy, the spontaneity, the authenticity in their children's faces. There's no doubt about George, Charlotte, and Louis being living, breathing children who exist beyond the press photos. But with Meghan and Harry, the glimpses feel almost artificial, as if they are protecting something or hiding something. And this is where Bauer's Montecito illusion theory bites hardest. He suggests that Meghan and Harry's California life isn't built around transparency, but around controlling perception. The children, in this context, are less family members and more props. Tools to reinforce the fairy tale image. Meghan, the devoted mother. Harry, the hands-on father. Together, united against a cruel and archaic monarchy. Every photo, every snippet of video, feeds this illusion. Ask yourself, why? After leaving the palace to escape scrutiny, would Meghan and Harry lean so heavily into producing their own content? Wasn't the point to live privately? Instead, they staged Oprah interviews in carefully curated gardens. They filmed Netflix series from within their Montecito compound. They released family photos at strategically timed moments, anniversaries, holidays, public relations crises. Privacy wasn't the goal. Control was. And the illusion goes deeper still. Online sleuths have pointed out strange inconsistencies in the Sussexes' family imagery. In one photo, Archie's hair appears drastically lighter than in others, sparking speculation about whether old images were recycled or edited. In another, proportions of the children look odd, as though altered digitally. Are these mere quirks of photography? Or signs of a carefully constructed illusion? Let's not forget the telling moment from the Oprah interview. Meghan and Harry sat down to discuss their pain with the monarchy. Meghan, visibly emotional, spoke of her struggles. Yet when the conversation turned to Archie and Lilibet, the footage cut to pre-filmed clips, not live visuals. Carefully controlled inserts, not candid glimpses. Why? If privacy was the concern, why stage any footage at all? The answer may lie in the need to sell the image of family life while maintaining absolute control over what the world is allowed to see. And then there's the deeper irony. Meghan and Harry fled Britain claiming they wanted freedom from the press. Yet in Montecito, they built a fortress not of silence, but of performance. They turned their home into a studio, their life into content, their children into characters. The illusion wasn't about disappearing from the world's gaze. It was about monetizing it. Consider this. Without Archie and Lilibet, without the image of Meghan and Harry as parents building a new family, would Netflix or Spotify have signed them? Would Oprah have sold millions of views on their interview? Would magazine spreads have clamored for their brand? The children aren't just symbols of love. They are central to the Sussex business model. And if their existence is murkier than presented, the entire Montecito empire could collapse like a house of cards. Direct question to you. Doesn't it strike you as strange that for a couple who claim to want privacy, their lives remain so meticulously staged? Privacy isn't staging Oprah. Privacy isn't filming a 6-part docuseries. Privacy isn't releasing choreographed Christmas cards. Privacy is disappearing. And Meghan and Harry clearly never intended to disappear. Bauer calls this the Montecito illusion, the glossy surface hiding cracks beneath. And those cracks become even more visible when you start connecting them to the official communications from the Sussexes versus the palace. Because when timelines are compared, when statements are lined up, the inconsistencies multiply. Which brings us to the next layer of this story, the contradictions in royal communications. Because the Montecito illusion might have fooled Hollywood. But inside the palace, even official announcements began to unravel. Royal communications are supposed to be airtight. Every announcement, every press release, every public statement is weighed, timed, and triple-checked. The monarchy has built its survival on credibility. Dates, names, places, they all have to line up. Which is why the contradictions in the official communications surrounding Archie and Lilibet's births stand out like flashing red lights. Tom Bauer argues that these contradictions aren't minor clerical errors. They're cracks in the facade. Signs of a story that was stitched together hastily, carelessly, and deceptively. Let's begin with Archie's birth in May 2019. On the morning of May 6th, Buckingham Palace released a statement to the press. The Duchess of Sussex has gone into labor. The world waited. Royal reporters gathered. Speculation surged. But then, just a couple of hours later, another statement dropped. Meghan had already delivered. Archie was born at 5:26 a.m. Do you see the problem? If Meghan had given birth before dawn, why announce at nearly 2 p.m. that she was only in labor? That's not a slip. That's a contradiction.